Hi guys, Therese Coffey, the Secretary of State for the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, DEFRA, was invited to speak to people in agriculture at an event organised by the National Farmers Union. Now, I said before that the NFU cautioned about Brexit back in 2016, but unfortunately many farmers backed leave, believing that getting out of the EU would allow them to farm as they wish and not have to follow what they saw or what they were told were restrictive practices. Well, obviously farming isn't going so good, but Brexiteer Coffey was here attempting some half-arsed damage control. I'll leave a link to the full speech and interview, but here's a clip that demonstrates just how much she cares about farmers.
What plans have you got to deal with a market failure situation and use those powers that we took control of?
Well, I think right now we're not seeing necessarily. I understand the costs are high. Food inflation is high. Your input costs are high. That's why we're working on energy security. I'm not necessarily seeing a market failure. So
we saw a market failure with pigs and poultry.
Well, I'm not sure that we've seen a market failure with poultry.
We had 1 billion less eggs in 2022 to 2019.
That's not necessarily a market failure. So
we've lost businesses.
Hey, I'm not denying that people have chosen potentially not to restock on certain things. That's why we're still going through our supply chain reviews, which I indicated earlier. We're close to concluding aspects of certainly on dairy and the pigs, and we will consider potentially other sectors. But frankly, sometimes it doesn't help when you have people, not you, Minette, it was somebody else, goes to Parliament, tells them there's this massive shortage of all these problems about the poultry sector, and what a surprise. Farmers are going nuts at Christmas time because they've got a glut of free-range chicken and they're not getting the prices they wanted for it. Consumers will respond. If we talk about the potential of food scandals, we work so hard, as do you, to try and make sure biosecurity is there. We shouldn't be putting ideas into people's minds that somehow food is not safe. We need...
Wow. This is an MP, a minister, who voted to allow water companies to pump raw sewage into rivers and lakes. And now she's coming out and saying, I wish people would stop with these scare stories, because what it's doing is it's undermining our narrative that everything is perfectly fine. You heard here how production is way down because of Brexit, of course, because of a whole number of factors, but Brexit has to be added to this. But the response from the government minister, of course, is we need to convince people to stop talking about problems. I don't even know how to respond to some of these things anymore. It's just so absurd. If we convince people that there isn't a problem, and look, when it comes to Brexit, we've seen how checks are not being carried out. Spot checks, the odd spot check is carried out on goods moving from the EU into the UK. And I talked about this maybe on a live stream, or I don't remember where I mentioned it, but there's a real risk that companies in the EU who want to offload goods that they can't sell in the EU will sell them into the UK knowing that there won't be checks carried out. Inferior quality. There are risks to agriculture in the UK because checks are not being carried out on animal health. So viruses, pathogens could come in and they're not being checked because the standards are being lowered. This is part of Brexit. This is what Therese Coffey campaigned for and supports, removing protections for farmers, removing regulations. And these, so far, things have been okay to a certain extent. But there's a real risk going forward that if checks are not carried out, something could come in and it could decimate the agricultural sector. And then the Brexiteers will say it's nothing to do with Brexit. It's nothing to do with us. And they'll start finger pointing. But here you have complete and utter contempt for farming. Farmers are going under, and her response is, well, people are just selecting different products. The arrogance of this individual. I really hope she's going to lose her seat at the next election. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.